This chapter explains how compliance with open source licenses works. It is intended to add the how to the what discussed in the last chapter. It is important to understand how this works, to ensure an organization avoids unnecessary mistakes in the adoption, use, and deployment of software made from or containing open source. Please note this chapter does not require a legal background. While I will discuss some concepts from law, I will do this in a non-technical way that does not require any previous legal knowledge. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to understand the objective of compliance, the basics of open source compliance, and also the common compliance issues that sometimes arise. Whilst there may be some complexity and nuance, compliance can be considered to be three basic steps. 1. Know what you are using. 2. Know how you are using it. And finally, 3. Satisfy the license obligations. In other words, a process for identifying and tracking the open source components that are present in your software. For example, your policy may require that no software component is incorporated into your software unless you have identified where it has come from, identified the license applicable to it, determined whether you can comply with that license, and recorded all of this information. There should be a process that identifies how you are using each open source component, or a policy covering how you're allowed to use it. The conditions of each open source license that apply may vary depending on the use case, with an example being that using code licensed under GPL2 on the server side of a hosted software as a service (SaaS) application is not distributed, and therefore there is no requirement to make the source code available to the people making use of the service. However, if you take the exact same code and distribute it to customers so that they can run their own SaaS installation, then you would need to make the source code available to them. Typical use cases which could be recorded are internal use only, with no distribution or use by third parties. Sharing the application source with third parties, such as partners who build the application themselves. Distributing the application as a package or binary with the third parties. Or making the functionality of the application available to customers on a SaaS basis, while running the application itself on servers under your own control. There may be other use cases that are applicable to your circumstances and which are impacted by some of the licenses to software which you are using, especially if those licenses are not open source but are proprietary licenses with some open source characteristics. In other words, there should be a process capable of handling ensuring open source license obligations that arise from your organization's practices are met. For example, accessing a document containing the open source notices from the application's About menu.